Okay. Good afternoon to all. Okay. Good afternoon to Frontline Wireless of COVID pandemic. Good afternoon to Frontline Warriors of the COVID pandemic. Hope you enjoyed the previous class, pre-ECG, the medical class. I think. Yeah. I think you have relaxed well, and now ready for the second class. Yeah. Just relax for some more time and get oriented. We being the orthopedics, we are not preferred to be the first line because there are several first line barriers like medicines, pulmonologists, anesthesists. So we prefer to be little more back lines, fifth lines, because we have touched the stethoscope many years ago. This is just for your relaxation session, and I know how hard it is to listen the orthopedics class at this time, this odd hours, with a delicious lunch in front of you. But being your frontline warriors learning all subjects, it is compulsory to listen, and somehow the orthopedics is somewhat neglected and seen as a low in UG students. Mostly it will be seen as a weird subject most of the times, and most of the times it is abandoned because it is a little subject compared to the surgery. It is a part of the surgery, and most of the time you will be distracted by the beauty of the surgery and the importance in the marks and the other comparative features by the surgery. So but now it is a exam time, so you have to concentrate on art also. It is also important for your PG scoring. Now all of them are running around PG. Okay. With this introduction, let us go to the injuries around shoulder girdle. I myself, Venkatesh, senior resident of orthopedics department. And what is your objective in learning the shoulder injuries in this lesson, in this class? Okay. Yeah. Let us think for a 5 seconds. What is the objective of the learning around the injuries class? Obviously, it is a 10 marks essay. You know it well. You have to score in the exams, right? So it is a 10 marks essay. But is this only the objective? Yeah, if it is the objective, it is only sustained for only your final year part. What about the rest of your life? You are the doctor, so you will be well versed with the injuries around the shoulder in your future also. So, in this situation, let us see a case scenario. Suppose a neighbor of you in this pandemic situation, lockdown, came to you with pain and unable to move his right shoulder following a fall at his home. Okay. Being you a busy person and is a frontline barrier, you are out of home and your mother picked up the call and said this. This is well known meme known to you, and just read for a second. He has given you the history of fall and pain in the shoulder, and you very relaxedly advise the take the analgesic, that is paracetamol, for 650 milligrams. And now, what is your feeling of your mother? Yeah, he feels that you are a good doctor, and now the situation comes. The patient came again and pain has not relieved, and now he is unable to move his right shoulder also. So always suspect the patients. Not all patients are in the same type. There may be some patients like this. You are well known about this character, how irritating he is. Many of you know about his. Yeah, let us think he is the your patient. Now, before coming to you, you must have searched the Google for many times, and Google will nicely give the all the injuries. You also may not know sometimes. That is clavicular fractures, dislocations, and many other injuries with a large terms like Bankart, skill sacks, such type of lesions wording in the quoted in the search history. So with all this history, he came to you, and now you are in a situation like this. Okay, you are also well known with this. Okay, then what is your further. Being you are a young frontline warrior, your neighbors are very eager to see the how you treat the patient. So they are around you, and the next one is they will not go. They will see you, and now you understand your situation. Now comes the what is your next move? What will you do? By this time, you may know that you are dealing with the shoulder case because with the history of pain and shoulder around the joint and he fell down. Now, you will search for your past 3 years basic anatomy and your all history that is know about the shoulder. Now comes the first one is the relations of the shoulder. Okay, you are well versed with the relations and it starts with skin. And next one is superficial fascia, and next one deep fascia, and a beautiful muscle diagram drawn with 3 lines. That is vein or anything, vein, artery, and nerve. Okay, this is your basic known subject about the shoulder. Okay, now what further? But remember, you are dealing with is this patient already know what you know till now. So you should be professional like him. Yeah, sure. You should anticipate what is coming from the patient, what he is about to ask you, and how should be cautious about your treatment. So with this basic term, we should go to the anatomy of the glenohumeral joint. You well know that shoulder is composed of a humeral head. Shoulder joint is made up of the articular surface of the humeral head and glenoid articular surface. This is the basic structure. Let us get the analogy with the golf ball and the post. This is golf ball is the shoulder. This is the post is the glenoid. See, there is a minimum contact area. The articular surface is a minimum contact area between the articular surface of glenoid and the post, that is humeral head. So it is less stable. It may tilt on either side, that is anterior, posterior, and anterior side. So it should be stable. Yeah, right. So it is least stable if it is like this. Then how it is stable? This structure is the glenoid. This green structure is the glenoid. It will make the shoulder joint somewhat more stable. Now see, the ball is more stable. This improves the stability. Yeah, right. So this is now the glenoid labrum is added to the glenoid cavity. So ball is more stable, head of humerus. This is glenoid labrum. And next, this is the depiction of the glenoid labrum. And this is how it is attached to the glenoid rim, bony rim. Now comes the function. What is the function of the glenoid? Already we have seen the stability of the joint. Now it comes the suction effect. It gives the suction effect to the shoulder joint. The only structure that is attached to the glenoid labrum, that is labrum, is the long head of bicep. This is the entrance bit. You have to stress it and remember it. The only structure attached to glenoid labrum is the long head of biceps. Yeah, see, this is a comparison how unstable the shoulder joint is. On the left side of your image, you will see the glenoid cavity and the humeral head. See, there is very less contact area. Whereas in the right side, the hip, the contact area of the ball, that is femoral head, and pelvis is very long, that is very deep. So it is more stable. The least stable joint is shoulder. Now increasing added to the stability, capsule will increase the stability. It will surround from the all around the shoulder joint, that is synovial joint, from glenoid cavity to the humeral head. Yeah, the capsule is thickened at some regions, that is superior glenohumeral ligament, middle, inferior, and lower, that is inferior glenohumeral ligaments. These are the glenohumeral ligaments that will add further stability. Now see the joint capsule. It is inherently weak below. Because why this is inherently weak? Because it allows movement, facilitates the free movement, because the abduction of the shoulder needs free movement of the inferior capsule. That way it is a somewhat redundant, that is free, but it may adds to the instability of the joint. Then what are the structures that are preventing the instability? This is the coracohumeral ligament. See, this is the coracohumeral ligament. It prevents the inferior dislocation, inferior movement of the humeral head. It extends from the glenoid cavity and attaches to the lesser tuberosity. Okay, it prevents the inferior movement. Then comes the superior displacement is prevented by coracoacromial. See this arrow pointing the coracoacromial. This prevents the movement of humeral head towards superior side. Now comes the clavicular head. How clavicle is placed and attached to the acromion. Two ligaments prevent the superior movement of the clavicle from the shoulder joint, that is conoid and trapezoid ligaments. These extend from coracoid process to clavicle. These prevent the superior displacement of the clavicle. Now comes the glenohumeral movements. There are 6 degrees of freedom. That is, first one is the flexion. That is movement in the sagittal plane. The hand comes forward of you. Okay. And when the hand goes beside back, that is back of you, that is in sagittal plane, that is extension. And abduction. This is B. Abduction is the coronal plane movement. That is, arm moves away from you, and the head directs inferiorly. Now the adduction, it moves to the center of the body. These are the 4 movements along with internal rotation or medial rotation. In the flexed elbow, if your hand touches your belly, that is the internal rotation, and if the hand goes away from the belly, that is external rotation. So this is the depiction. See, this is flexion extension, this is internal rotation, and this is external rotation. Now this is the scapula, other bone participating in the humerus, that is shoulder joint. I don't need you to remember all these details, but remember this one. This is my pointer is showing, this is the scaphoid fossa. Okay, scaphoid fossa or subscapular fossa. This fossa is deep, so that when the shoulder dislocates anteriorly, it will be placed in it. It cannot come backside, as there is a elevation, that is glenoid elevation. So you have to reduce it, give the traction. It will come again in the future slide, further slide, and I need to remember this. See, these arrows are pointing towards the coracoid. If you see the coracoid from any angle, you are seeing the anterior side of the shoulder. Remember this one. And if you see the acromion process or spine of the scapula, you are seeing the posterior aspect of the shoulder. Just remember these 2 points. Okay. Yeah. Now comes to rotator cuff muscles. These are the further stability. These are dynamic stabilizers. Okay. This is the entrance bit again. Rotator cuff muscles are the dynamic stabilizers, not static. That means dynamic means when they move, when they contract, they will stabilize the joint. Yeah, I will start with the teres minor, because we will be confused with the teres minor or teres major. Okay, this is along also the PZ entrance bit. Teres minor is a part of the rotator cuff muscles, not the teres major, because teres minor is attached to head, not the teres major. So this is the primary internal rotator. See, you are seeing the scapula, backside acromion you are seeing, no? So this is the backside. This is present on the posterior side. When it contracts, it will externally rotate the shoulder joint. Next comes the subscapularis. See, you are seeing the coracoid in front of you. So this is the anterior muscle, subscapularis. And this is the powerful internal rotator, attaches to lesser tuberosity. See, this brown muscle which is present below, this is teres major, which is not a part of rotator cuff, because it is not attaching to proximal head of the humerus. So this is not, teres major is not the rotator cuff muscle. So when subscapularis contracts, it will internally rotate. Next comes this green muscle is the infraspinatus. This is also posterior muscle, and when it contracts, externally rotates the shoulder. Then supraspinatus. This is present in the supraspinatus fossa. Okay, when it contracts, it abducts the shoulder for the initial 15 degrees. Next, deltoid. This is not a part of rotator cuff muscle. Remember, this is not a part. Only 4 muscles are the rotator cuff muscles, but it will cause the powerful abduction. Okay, after 15 degrees. Now comes the stabilizer, dynamic stabilizer. I said already, no, these are the dynamic stabilizers. See, when contracting, they oppose the humeral head tightly to the scapula. So these are dynamic stabilizers. Yeah, remember these are the relations. This is the axillary nerve. This is very close to the humerus, winding around the surgical neck of the humerus. So you have to remember this relation. Forget about this for the time being. Remember the axillary nerve. Yeah. Now you have to know the basic views of the shoulder, because when the patient comes with the X-ray, you have to know what are you seeing in the X-ray. So this is the basic views of the X-ray. See, this is the anteroposterior view of the shoulder joint. So now you are seeing ball and post. Of course, glenoid you cannot see in the X-rays. This is the ball and the socket of the X-ray. Now this is the axillary view. If you direct the beam from the axillary side of the shoulder and place the X-ray on the superior aspect, you will see like this. You will see from the axilla. Imagine that you are seeing the humeral head from the axilla. It will be look like this. Then next, this is the scapular view. This is important, very important in the dislocation. So concentrate on this. This is a beam is directed along the scapula. Okay, the scapula looks like Y. See in this picture, it is looking like Y. So the center, the limbs of the Y is surrounded by the humeral head. Humeral head is always present in the junction of this limbs of Y. This is in this circle. Now see, if you are seeing the humeral head towards the acromion, I said no, already acromion is the posterior aspect. So if you see the humeral head towards the posterior side, that is posterior, then it is a posterior dislocation. And now in this lower image, see, this is the coracoid, this is the anterior side, and the humeral head is on the coracoid side, that is anterior side. So this is anterior dislocation. See, now this is the anteroposterior image of the shoulder. You may be confused if there is any dislocation or not, because almost the head is congruent with the glenoid. Okay. Now you advise for the scapular view. See, now the basic you have learned already. You are seeing the acromion. The head is on the acromion. So this is posterior dislocation. And now with this knowledge, you became the professor. Okay. You are well versed with this knowledge. Now you can lead the patient. Now see, now go back to patient and what he is complaining. He is complaining pain and unable to move the shoulder. These are nothing but symptoms he is giving. Okay. Now ask for the type of trauma he sustained during the fall. The main mechanism of the shoulder dislocation is abducted, extended and externally rotated arm. Okay, abducted, external and externally rotated. This is the entrance bit, you have to remember it. How? Or a direct blow from the posterior to anterior. See, this is the, this player is falling on his abducted, externally rotated and extended shoulders. So he may prone to shoulder dislocation. And this is a direct trauma. See, this player is directly hitting his back from his directed force from the posterior to anterior. So this is the second type of mechanism. See, this is the extended, externally rotated and abducted arm. This is the player position. She extended and externally rotated to throw the ball, and she is prone to dislocation if this pressure is directed posteriorly, that is extension. So these are the images, some of the images. This is the just the position. I am stressing it because this position is very important and asked frequently in the entrance exams. Now what you see and what you feel are the symptoms, signs. Okay. Now what is the major signs? The patient will hold his injured limb with other hand and shoulder is abducted and elbow is flexed. Loss of normal contour of the shoulder is seen. Okay, I will show you these in the images. There is an anterior bulge of the head of humerus may be visible or palpable, and there is a empty glenoid because the head is already moved forward. See, there is a holding his hand. She is holding his hand with the opposite hand and elbow is flexed. This is the characteristic position. And see, there is a empty glenoid. This bulge is the head. This is the head bulge and the empty glenoid is seen. And this is the loss of shoulder contour. There is a loss of shoulder contour because there is no head and no deltoid contour. So there is loss. And this is another image showing the loss of one. And now you have to confirm your diagnosis. So you have to perform some tests. These are the 4 tests. First one is the Hamilton ruler test. If you place a scale at the side of the shoulder, normally there is a deltoid contour and the head is in the place. So this scale will either touch the deltoid, or if you bend, it will touch the lower lateral epicondyle. Okay, but never touch the both bony points at same time. But if the shoulder is dislocated, the head moved inside and there is loss of deltoid contour, now it will touch both acromion, that is acromion, and lateral epicondyle at the same time. This is the Hamilton ruler test. Is there any obligation to place only scale? No, it need not be. You can place any hard straight object. And then this is the Jugas test. What is the concept of this test? the patient unable to place his hand on the opposite shoulder and cannot able to flex his shoulder elbow so that he touches the abdomen. This is the Dugas test. Why this does not happen? Because patient cannot able to flex and adduct, because already we have seen that the position is extension and abduction. Now you cannot flex and adduct, so you are unable to perform the Dugas test. Yeah, now see the radiography. Already you have know the basic details I have discussed. Now see. Imagine if the patient come like this, you are suspicious if the head is dislocated or not. Now you go for the scapular Y images, that is scapular Y views. Now see, you are very clear. This is the acromion, that is posterior, and head is posterior. Now this is posterior dislocation. And if the coracoid anterior and head is anterior, now you are dealing with the anterior dislocation. Remember that head is always present in the limbs of the Y. If it is not present here, it is dislocated. So what are the types of anterior dislocation? Subcoracoid is the first one, that is head comes below the coracoid. This is the most common. Again, it is the entrance bit asked frequently. Subcoracoid is the most common one. Subglenoid is the second most common, and subclavicular is rare. Intrathoracic is very rare. It is associated with high energy trauma because the humerus has to go inside the thorax. It requires very high energy. Then what are the early complications? You should always suspect the complications. Before dealing with the treatment, you should see the complications. Early complications occurs during the injury, right? So first is the axillary nerve injury. You have seen already that axillary nerve is very near. So this is the axillary nerve injury. If its shoulders comes below, that is head comes below, it will immediately press the axillary nerve. So there is a loss of deltoid function. Patient cannot abduct, and there is a loss of sensation at the lateral aspect of arm. These are the two important signs you have to elicit. Then next comes the Bankart-Slidhan. See, what is the concept of Bankart-Slidhan? It is repeatedly asked in the entrance exams and in exams also. See, if the head has to go anteriorly, it is protected by the capsule and glenoid. We have seen in anatomy, no? So it has to move anteriorly. So it has to tear off the capsule and glenoid. Now, then only it can go anteriorly. So this tearing of the capsule from the anterior glenoid rim is known as Bankart-Slidhan. Remember, always Bankart-Slidhan is always present on the glenoid side. See, this is the again clear picture of the Bankart-Slidhan. This Bankart-Slidhan is present on the anterior rim because it is steering of the anterior capsule and anterior labrum. If head of humerus hits hard, then the part of the bone may fracture in the glenoid. This is called bony Bankarts. Okay. Next comes the Hill-Sachs-Lesion. What is concept of Hill-Sachs-Lesion? In Hill-Sachs-Lesion, as the head is going anteriorly in anterior dislocation, it always hits the anterior rim of the glenoid. See, this is the anterior rim of glenoid. And hitting part is the posterior part of the head, not the anterior. Because it has already gone anteriorly, the posterior part is hitting the glenoid. So, Hill-Sachs-Lesion is always present on the head of the humerus, and the position is important, that is posterior and superior. Remember, it is posterior and superior. And rotator cuff injury. Of course, the rotator cuff is attached tightly to the shoulder. During dislocation, it may injure. And late complications are recurrent dislocation. Because of laxity of capsule or damage to the articular structures, there may be recurrent shoulder dislocations and rounding of the due to repeated damage. And now what matters most to the patient? You have learned this, but what mostly matters to the patient is treatment and his prognosis. So it requires early diagnosis and reduction. You have already diagnosed early. Now come to the reduction part. It is a teamwork by Coker. What does the team mean? First one is the traction. I said no, in that is fossa, inside the fossa, anterior glenoid fossa, subscapularis fossa, the head is impacted. So you have to disimpact it, give the traction. Okay, see, give the traction and you will disimpact. Next one is the external rotation. As the head is already in the mild external rotation, you have to further external rotate it so that it disengages from the scaphoid fossa. See, this is the external rotation. So it will disengages from the subscaphoid fossa. Okay, it is present in the scaphoid fossa now, so it will disengages from it. So next is the adduction. So you have to lever the head away from the glenoid. It is near to glenoid, so you have to adduct it. So it will come away from the glenoid. Now you will quickly internal rotate. So it places the head inside the glenoid. See, you have to internal rotate it. So see the here the head sits in the glenoid fossa. Now strap it with the anything that strap that does not move the shoulder. Okay, now this is important. This is a repeatedly asked question, so I am repeating it. First is the traction, second is the external rotation, then adduction and internal rotation. This includes the teamwork, that is team. Then what are the other maneuvers? This is the traction counter traction. One person will give counter track and other person will pull the arm and manipulate it in the same manner. This is the Hippocrates maneuver. If you are single rescuer who is present alone in the department, then you have to follow this Hippocrates maneuver. Before that, this, see how the leg of the surgeon should be engaged in the axilla so that it levers the head of the humerus and you have to manipulate with the other hands. Before this, doing this, explain to the patient. Otherwise, he may look at you like this. It is somewhat a weird technique, so you have to explain it before. This is the Stimson's gravity assisted method. If you tie a weight to the arm and place it, the muscles will slowly relax and head will be reduced by itself. Then what is closer reduction? When closer reduction is contraindicated in fracture dislocations. You should not reduce the dislocation when it is associated with fracture because you have no leverage to reduce it. Okay. Now comes the operative management. These are just I will give you the basic concept. First one is this is actually done for the repeated dislocators. That is recurrent dislocation. That is putty plate operation. The basic concept is, have you ever buckled the belt? If the trouser is loose and your buckle, how you buckle? If you slowly move from one hole to another hole of your belt till it is tight. Same way as your trouser, you have two buttons. If it is loose, you will hook with the another button. Yeah, that is either clear. In the same way, if the anterior capsule and subscapularis is loose, what will we do? We will cut the anterior capsule longitudinally and we will buckle it over it. Okay, so that, see, on the left image the trouser is overlapped one on the other. See, in the same way the capsule is overlapped and stitched. Now it is tight. Okay, because there is decrease in the space for the anterior dislocation of the head. This is the basic concept of putty plate operation. Next is the Bankart operation. This is done done arthroscopically. What happens? This is simple surgery. You will just suture the glenoid, tear glenoid and labrum to its original place with the suture anchor. This is Bankart operation. Next is the Latourette Bristow operation. This is also for glenoid loss. Okay, what is the concept is, if you imagine this surface as a glenoid and this ball, this maroon color ball is a humeral head, it has to oscillate in this platform. Okay, suppose if there is a Bankart lesion, half of the glenoid is lost. Okay, so you have the loss of the glenoid. So when the ball, that is humeral head, comes down, it will dislocate anteriorly. So you have to prevent it. So what will you do? You cut the coracoid from its attachment base and you will attach it to the loss of the glenoid where there is loss. So that, see, now there is a increased surface. This arc is increased now. So now the humeral head can oscillate freely. There is a more chance to rotate with less dislocation. Now comes the inferior dislocation. This is the rarest of the shoulder dislocation types. This is famously called as luxatio erecta. This is a Greek word come from the meaning because luxatio, that is dislocation or subluxation, moved. It is dislocated, displaced from its position. What does mean? Erecta means the hand is in the erect position, that is hyperabducted position beside the face of the patient. So this comes as a luxatio erecta. This is the entrance bit repeatedly asked. What is the mechanism? Hyperabduction. The arm is hyperabducted. Now the inferiorly directed force acts on the arm. See, this is the player hand is hyperabducted. Now there is a inferior force. So he is prone for the inferior dislocation. Yeah, See, she is lifting heavy weights and there is a hand is in hyperabducted position. If the force is in inferior direction, so this may also prone to inferior dislocation. This is the characteristic position of the hand of the inferior dislocated patient. This is the X-ray picture. And how will you reduce? You gently give the traction and adduct the arm slowly. It will reduce. If it is not reduced, the cause is the buttonholing. That is, the capsule is teared and the head came inferiorly. See, this is the head coming inferior from the capsule. Now it will not allow the reduction. It will tightly hold around the neck of the humerus. So now you have to operate and release the head. See, these are the there is high chances of complication because it is a high energy force. The head is going inferiorly. It may damage the vascular structures and neurological axillary structures or brachial plexus, and there may be fractures also. And now comes the posterior dislocation. This is the second most common, but it is mostly neglected. Why? Because shoulder is in adducted, flexion, and internal. This is the almost normal position of the hand. So it is mostly missed in this condition. What are the types? Subacromial. It may be present behind the acromial or below the glenoid or below the spinous process of the scapula. The mechanism is electric shock. The violent contraction of the posterior group of muscles will pull the head from its place. Okay, or there may be a direct force. See, this is the posterior dislocation. Now again the basic concept I have already told. The acromion is outside and the head is outside, that is posterior. So this is the posterior dislocation. This is the reverse Hill-Sachs lesion. See, now the head is posterior, so that anterior part of head is damaged. This is called reverse Hill-Sachs lesion. This is seen in posterior dislocation. This is also entrance pit. So remember it. Now see the light bulb sign. This is the frequently asked entrance question. Light bulb sign is seen in. The direct answer is posterior dislocation of the shoulder. Force your brain to see the imagine it. Is there any bulb? You are seeing any bulb? No. Yeah, still not getting? Now, what will you do? Don't worry, draw a bulb. See, now you can see clearly the bulb. So, anyhow, you have to remember that posterior bulb sign, light bulb sign is seen in posterior dislocation of the shoulder. Okay, now the closer reduction method. Give gentle traction, adduct the arm and gently lift the humeral head into the glenoid fossa. Yeah, now comes the fractures around the shoulder. Fractures around the shoulder. I will discuss the basic principles of any fracture around the shoulder, and then I will discuss each fracture in a specific manner. Now see the basic principles. Any fracture around the shoulder has some basic principles. You should always inquire the type of trauma. It may be severe or trivial. Severe trauma or maybe less trauma. And common symptoms for any fracture anywhere is pain, swelling. You know all about this: pain, swelling and bruising, unable to move the joint distal to it. And if it is an open fracture, there will be bleeding. These are the common symptoms. Then what are the common signs, sir? Tenderness at specific fracture site. Okay. And next one is the loss of transmitted movement. That is, if you move the distal part of the fracture site, you cannot feel the proximal movement, proximal part movement. This is the loss of transmitted movement. And arm is held in across the chest with the opposite limb. This is already we have seen. See, this is common for fractures also. Because why? Because the fracture has occurred, the weight of the limb cannot be supported no more. So the patient has to hold with the arm with the opposite hand. Okay, so that she is holding the arm with the opposite. And fracture specific radiograph. I will discuss it with each fracture pattern. And now comes the classification. You have to classify the fracture. What for the classification? Is there any usefulness? Yes. First, you have to understand the fracture pattern. Classification gives you the depth of fracture, velocity of injury, and type of the fracture. Is it a type 1, type 2, and increases the complications of the fracture. And next one is the communication between the surgeons. If you say one surgeon to other surgeon that is a type 2 fracture, he will understand by type 2. Okay, it is already classified. So you are not able to give you cannot want to give the normal fine details of the fracture. Okay, communication between the surgeons. Next one is the guide the treatment. You have to, the classification should guide you to the treatment. If it is a type 3 fracture, it is most complicated. That means you need open reduction, like that. It should guide the treatment. These are the 3 principles for classification of any fracture. Now, what are the common complications? These are early. As a fracture is occurring, the distal or proximal fragment may damage the surrounding nerve. So, always see for the nerve or vessel damage. These are common for all fractures. There is no specificity in it. And the late complications are, of course, malunion or non-union. These are fracture dependent based on their blood supply now. Next one is finally the management. How will you manage? You will either manage closer manuals or by operative. This depends upon the fracture type. And what are the goals of treatment? Finally, what patient wants is the minimal loss of function and minimal residual deformity. These should be attained in treating any fractures. Okay. And when should you go for closed manipulation, and when the operative, and how? See, there are the certain common operative indications for every fracture. You need not be remember all for every fracture. There is certain common indications. While writing your exam questions or while you are thinking, you have to concentrate on this. Open fractures. Any open fracture requires operative. You cannot reduce and leave it like that. So you have to treat the open fracture operatively. And widely displaced. Widely displaced fracture will never come to alignment. So you have to open it. And if there is an artery or nerve or vein, major vein damage, you have to open and repair it. Again, this is the indication for operative. Next one is the floating shoulder. What does it mean? If the shoulder is supported by either proximally by the clavicle and scapula and distally by the humerus. If there is both clavicle and scapula fracture, the shoulder is free now. It is neither supported by clavicle or scapula. So it is freely floating. Now you have to fix the fracture operatively. You cannot have the closer reduction. And symptomatic non-union. This is of course the definitive indication and part of polytrauma, because a polytrauma patient cannot be live alive with a closer manipulation for so long periods. So he will develop the other complications. So you have to go operatively. Now comes the clavicle fractures. This is easy to recognize because clavicle is the most superficial bone, subcutaneous bone. Okay. So it is easy to recognize the fracture, and majority will unite unevenly. Yeah, these are some interesting facts and also entrance questions. This is the first bone to ossify in the body and occurs at the 5 weeks of gestation period. And next one is the intramembranous ossification. This is the only bone, one of the bone, not the only bone, one of the bone undergoing intramembranous ossifications. Okay, now let's go the minor anatomy. You does not require the fine details. Remember these two. The medial part is attached to the sternocleidomastoid muscle and the lateral part is attached to trapezius. Okay, and it is a part of the acromioclavicular joint. These 2 points you remember. Okay, next one. This is the function of the clavicle. The medial third and the middle third will protect the brachial plexus and the major artery and veins coming from the thoracic outlet. So it is protecting the vascular and neurological structures. So you should always guard for the complications seen after the fractured clavicle. So this is the function of the clavicle. Next, I said already, displacement. This medial fragment is displaced superiorly by pull of the sternocleidomastoid, and the lateral fragment is inferiorly displaced by the weight of the hand. Okay. So again, anatomy. Yeah. First see this layer. This is the Allman's classification. This is simple classification. Type 1 is the middle 1/3 fractures. This is mostly 80% of clavicular fractures are middle 1/3. This is type 1 Allman's. And type 2 is the lateral third. And type 3 is the medial third, which is rare. This is a simple classification, remember it. Then see, why the middle third is mostly prone for injury or fracture most? Because see the cross section. This arrow is showing the cross section of the medial part, medial most part. It is very thick in diameter, and middle part is somewhat narrow, and lateral part is very flat. So the junction between the middle and lateral part is a weak junction in the chain. So always fracture will try to follow this weak point. So most of the clavicular fractures are in middle third and lateral third junctions are in the middle third. And added to this, the next important is the main nutrient artery that is carrying blood to the clavicle enters at the coracoclavicular ligaments. Those are present just medial to the lateral end. That is in this position, this first position, ending of this first position. So there is continuous blood supply. There is continuous dynamic movement of the bone. This is the uh, least supported by the calcium deposition. So as there is continuous blood supply, there is a least deposition of the calcium in this. Okay, so this is more prone for fractures. Then mechanism of injury, trauma. Trauma is the most common mechanism. How? Fall against a lateral shoulder girdle. Okay, this is how. If a patient fall directly over his shoulder girdle, then force will be directly passed to the clavicle. It will fracture the clavicle. Next, least common is the fall on the outstretched hand and direct blow to clavicle. This is also rare. Now come to the specific features of the clavicle fractures. See, look for always skin tenting. There will be, it is a superficial bone, no? So they look for the skin tenting. And neurovascular injury, pneumothorax. These two are important because there may be pneumothorax. The fracture may pierce the lung, which is present on the near to the medial third. So you should look for the pneumothorax and subcutaneous emphysema is present. And radiographs. Already you have seen the radiograph of the X-rays. So non-operative treatment. When will you go for non-operative treatment? Most of the times clavicle fractures are managed closer manipulation techniques. Okay, either by sling or figure of 8. After 2 to 4 weeks, you gently move the limb so that gentle range of movement exercise will be started. See, this is the reduction technique. See, this is how you stretch the shoulder posteriorly, that is extending the shoulder so that the two fractures will align, and now you brace for 3 weeks. Then when you go for the operative indications, see, widely displaced. First one is the widely displaced fracture. That is, see, in this picture there is wide overlap. There is overlap of the two fragments. So it cannot go for union. Even if it is united, the length of the clavicle is shortened so that arm cannot function normally. So you have to go for operative fixation. Next one is the skin tenting. I said no, there is a tenting. This proximal fragment is tenting the skin. So there is a chance for the skin injury. It will become open fracture. So this is a surgical picture. So it will become the open fracture if it is not managed operative. So this is the second indication, skin tenting. The third one is the non-union. If the fracture goes non-union, you have to open and fix with either plating. This is the plating of the clavicle fracture. Other methods are either with a KY or hook plates. These are the different instruments used. Next comes the humeral shaft fractures. Yeah, these are the high energy fractures. Okay, humeral shaft is the cortical bone. It requires high energy. So these are the high energy fractures, and associated injuries always present mostly. Okay, so there may be polytrauma. Always look for the polytrauma of the patient, and always look for the radial nerve function because it is mostly associated with low radial nerve palsy, most commonly in the lower third. I will discuss it further. What are the non-operative? Symptoms and signs are common. I have already discussed in basic principles of fractures. Now, non-operative treatment indications. When will you non-operate? If it is the only isolated fracture, that is not a part of a polytrauma, or there is a adequate alignment after splinting. If you splint the fracture and reduce the fracture, if there is acceptable alignment, that is what is acceptable is anteroposteriorly there should be less than 20 degrees of bowing, and from lateral side there should be less than 30 degrees. This is acceptable. Now you can go with closer reduction. Then when this is non-operative techniques, how the hanging arm cast or functional arthrosis. This is the functional arthrosis. Okay, this will compress, hold the fracture fragments together. See, the patient is in the functional arthrosis. Now the alignment is good. The proximal and distal fragments are aligned well, and there is a callus formation in this right picture. So after removal of the functional cast, see, there is a normal movement. There is normal movement of the arm function. This is the closer reduction. Then when will you go for operative indication? Along with the indications I said previously, these are the operative indications. How will you manage operatively? Either with compression plating or intramedullary fixation, that is intramedullary nails and TENS. These are instruments used in pediatric fractures. Yeah, these are the operative indications. Already I said, no, open fractures and vascular injuries. And if you fail close treatment, that is the acceptable alignment is not attained, you should go for the open reduction. That is, along with this, these three are the important indications. Radial nerve palsy after manipulation. Suppose you are manipulating the closed fracture and suddenly there is a radial nerve palsy. Now you don't know what happened to the radial nerve. So you have to open it and see. And floating elbow. I have already discussed now. Floating elbow means the humerus shaft is fractured and forearm bones are fractured. So now the elbow is free. It cannot be supported. So you have to fix the both forearm fractures and humerus fractures openly, operatively. And pathological fractures, because pathological fractures are less likely to reduce it by close manipulations. So you have to go openly. These are the TENS used in pediatric fractures. Titanium elastic nails. TENS means titanium elastic nails. These are the plate systems and these are the nails. Yeah, this is the Holstein-Lewis fracture. This is important both for the clinical purpose and your PG exams also. What is Holstein-Lewis fracture? This is the distal third fracture of the humerus, spiral fracture. Most commonly it is a spiral fracture occurring in the distal part. See the radial nerve, when it is passing through the fracture site, it is entrapped in the fracture site, or it may be just compressed by the sharp segments. There it may be contused. So this is the X-ray of the Holstein-Lewis fracture. Now some details about Holstein-Lewis fracture. This is the distal shaft fracture and radial nerve is mostly injured, okay, in this type of fracture. The incidence is up to 24%, okay. Most this type radial nerve palsy is in this type of situations is neuropraxia. That means they recover 90%. There is a recovery. So you need not openly manage it, okay. Operation is not required. You can wait. If there is no recovery, then you go for EMG, electromyography studies, and if there is no recovery for 12 weeks or up to 3 months, then you can openly reduce. Yeah, how will you assess the radial nerve function? There will be wrist drop, there will be finger drop, there will be thumb drop, and there is loss of sensation in the radial aspect of the hand. These are the signs for the radial nerve palsy. You should always look for these signs during if you suspect the Holstein-Lewis fracture. Yeah, this is the management of the radial nerve palsy during the closed period. You reduced the fracture and you treated it closely. Now you are expecting the recovery of the radial nerve. During this, you have to keep the hand in the cock-up splint. It will prevent the deformity. The hand should not fall, wrist should not fall. So this is a dynamic cock-up splint. Patient can able to flex the fingers and these strings will oppositely pull. That is, they will extend passively, okay. Yeah, now come to the proximal humerus fractures. There is a common symptoms and signs already I have discussed. Now see the specific features of the proximal humerus fractures. By definition, it is a fracture occurring at or proximal to surgical length. See this figure, it is occurring at or proximally the surgical length. This is the fourth part, okay. See this fourth surgical length. Any fracture that is occurring above is the proximal humerus, okay. The mechanism, most of the proximal humerus composed of metaphysis. This is a weak bone, and elderly patients are more prone to these fractures because already it is a metaphyseal bone and there is a added osteoporosis. So the risk factors are poor quality bone, which is seen in elderly patient above 65 years like that patient, and if the patient is osteoporosis further weak. So in young patient, actually it is a low energy trauma. If the patient falls on the outstretched hand, it may fracture. But when you see these fractures in the young patient, you should suspect the high energy trauma because their bone quality is good. You should look for the high energy traumas, okay. Now coming to the what are the deforming forces. Now the fracture has occurred. You have already seen the rotator cuff is attached all around the proximal humerus. So you have to see for the deforming forces. This is the subscapularis. You have already seen attached to the lesser tuberosity. It will pull the lesser tuberosity fragment and supraspinatus will pull the greater tuberosity fragment, and this is of course pectoralis. This is not a rotator cuff, but it is a pectoralis major. It will pull the shaft part medially. Yeah, here the important point is the posterior humeral circumflex artery. It has some role in these fractures. See the anatomy. The posterior circumflex humeral artery winds around the surgical neck along with the axillary nerve. Okay, when we have already discussed the surgical neck, the part above that is the proximal humerus. Okay, if the proximal humerus fractured, and it will compress the posterior circumflex humeral artery or axillary nerve. Why the posterior circumflex artery is more important is it almost supplies 64% of the blood supply to head. Suppose if this artery is damaged or compressed, you will end up with the avascular necrosis. So remember, this is the clinical point, and this is also entrance bit. Posterior circumflex artery supplies 64% of the supply to head. Yeah, how you clinically evaluate the patient? You should always look for the rib fractures and scapular and cervical fractures, because there is always osteoporosis in the elderly patient. These are elderly patient fractures. So you should always look for the rib, scapular and cervical fractures. And concurrent brachial plexus injuries. Already you know that surrounding structures may be injured in any fractures. That is axillary nerve, brachial plexus and arterial injury. I said no, PCA, posterior humeral circumflex artery. Now come to imaging. Radiographs. Already I discussed in the dislocation part. Now see the basic views. This is the gray shape view. What does gray shape view? Gray shape view. See, on the left side of your image, you are seeing the anteroposterior view. See the humerus head and this glenoid is overlapping. You cannot see the fracture clearly. But when you see the gray shape view, that is, this gray shape view will give you the clear gap between the glenoid and this humeral head surface. See, between these two arrows there is a clear surface, so that you can see the head clearly. Gray shape view. This is taken with 45 degrees tilt towards the horizontal. Okay, this is not required to you. Just remember the gray shape view. And next view is the value. This is pronounced as value, not Wallopu view. Most of them will pronounce as a Wallopu. This is value. PEA is silent. Value axillary view. This is asked commonly in the exams. This is bending. It will be given as a pictorial diagram in your entrance bits. If a patient tilts backwards and leans backwards over the film, and the X-ray is directed from superior. So remember this position. This is value axillary view. The weight of the arm will pull the humerus down, so that fractures will open clearly and there is a clear view. Next one is CT. If you are not clear with the X-ray views, you can go for the CT. See, the CT pictures are very clear. You can see the clear fracture lines and parts. Now comes the needs classification. Forget about this complex image. Concentrate only on the upper 4 images. Okay. The first, this is classified as part 1, 1 part, 2 part, 3 part and 4 part. So we are saying the part. Then what is the part means? Any fragment, the part is defined as any fragment of the fracture that has 45 degrees of rotation. So it has to rotate 45 degrees, or it has to move, that is displaced 1 centimeter. Okay. Now what is one part? If there is no part meets the criteria regardless of the actual number of fracture length. What does this mean? Now look the picture. In this first picture, there is 2 fracture lines, but no part of the fracture, no fragment is moving. Either it is rotated nor moved away from the fragment, the main fragment. Okay. Now it is considered as a one part. There is, forget about number of fracture lines. There may be 3, 4, 10 or 20, but no part is moving away from the other parts. So this is considered as one part fracture. And 2 part is the one part is moving away. So there are 2 parts, the main fragment and the 1 part. Okay, these are considered as 2 part. Like the 3 part, and this is the 4 part. Okay. Then non-operative treatment. Signs and symptoms are always common. There is no special signs and symptoms for this. Then non-operative treatment. How will you operate non-operatively? stable non-displaced or minimally displaced fractures. That is part 1 fractures. Part 1 fractures can be managed non-operatively with elderly patients with low functional demands. If the patient is 80 years old, he has a fracture, you cannot manage with operative because it will add more morbidity to the patient, the surgical stress and loss of blood. So you can manage non-operative. Next one is what you should expect if you non-operatively manage the fracture. Avascular necrosis. I said no. If there is a PCA damage, that is posterior circumflex humeral artery damage, you should always suspect the avascular necrosis. And these are normal complications for any fracture, non-union, malunion. There may be shoulder stiffness because lot of fractures surrounding the shoulder. So there is stiffness, and rotator cuff injury may be there or dysfunction, and post-traumatic arthritis there if there is a loss of articular surface. Then surgical options. When will you go surgically? Open reduction. If it is occurring in the young patients are always, they need a surgical powerful arm function, shoulder function. So they should be operated surgically. What are the different types of surgical techniques or implants? This is the Philos plate. Philos stands for proximal humerus interlocking osteosynthesis. Okay, this is called abbreviated as Philos. This plate is known as Philos plate. This is most commonly used in proximal head fractures. The screws are fixed to the fragment. This is K-wire fixation. If there is minimal displacement, you can fix the fractures with the minimal amount of K-wires. Yeah. This is hemi and reverse shoulder arthroplasty. If you cannot reduce the fracture head, if there is a 10 fracture line, 10 parts or 4 parts, there is severe destruction of the head, you cannot replace the original head. You cannot maintain the original head. So you have to replace it with some prosthesis. This is hemiarthroplasty of the shoulder. This is reverse shoulder arthroplasty. The details of you is not required. The specialty of this is the glenoid part is reversed. That is, it is present on the head side and the ball part is present on the glenoid side. So remember it as a reverse shoulder arthroplasty. Now the important your PG stresses. What you have to remember in this lesson. First one is the important point. Reverse Hill-Sachs is seen in posterior dislocation of the shoulder, and the position of the reverse Hill-Sachs is always in the anteromedial part of the head. Remember it. This is the most confusing entrance bit. Second one is most common anterior shoulder dislocation is subcorcoid. Okay, this may be asked repeatedly. And next one is most common nerve injury in anterior dislocation is the axillary nerve because it is winding around the neck and is very close to the head. And next most commonly missed shoulder dislocation is posterior dislocation. This is also entrance bit frequently asked. I said no, the limb is in the normal position. That is adduction, flexion and internal rotation. This is mostly the normal position of the arm. So it may be missed posteriorly. And the common sign is light bulb. Light bulb. You should always remember the light bulb sign seen in the posterior dislocation. Okay. Yeah. In concluding, this is the famous sentence: the disease may end with your treatment, but it never starts with the introduction. So you should be alert. You should go in a sequential manner to diagnose any disease or any fracture or anything in the medicine field. So first you should hear the history and you should examine the patient and you should go for the proper radiology. The third step and the fourth step, you should think based on these three history inputs, and then you reach the final diagnosis. If you try to jumble it, if you directly go to radiography, then you partially hear, then you test, then it will end up with this type of situation. You cannot go to the final diagnosis. So always remember, you should go in a sequence. Okay, and thank you. It's already time for lunch. Have a nice lunch. Thank you. Yeah, there is a small talk regarding your exam, forthcoming exam that is on the orthopedics, regarding orthopedics. This talk will be taken by the Shivani, Dr. Shivani, my colleague. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Hope you enjoyed the class taken by Venkatesh sir. And now I just want to remind you that you have an exam on 30th May, that is on Saturday. And the topics which are going to be included are infections, musculoskeletal tuberculosis, and spine conclusion, which includes spondylolisthesis, spinal canal stenosis, scoliosis, kyphosis, seronegative spondyloarthropathies, and ankylosing spondylitis. And apart from that, polytrauma and pelvic fractures. These are the 5 topics which we have taken in online classes. These topics will be included for your exams, for your exam, this Saturday exam, and questions will be all in MCQ format and fill in the blanks. So the questions which are given in the paper are direct bits and they are taken from the classes which we have taken. So please pay attention to them, listen once again, and even make a note of all the full forms. In polytrauma, you have terms like ETC, which means early total care. Like that, you have to go through different scores as well as their full forms. They may also be given in your exams. Prepare well. The question paper will be easy and answer well. Thank you.
Okay. If there is any doubts or any queries regarding my topic based on my topic, you can mail me. My email ID is Venkatesh 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 7498 at the rate gmail.com. Venkatesh 7498 at the rate gmail.com. Okay. You can ask any questions or queries related to shoulder injuries. Thank you.